Hi, this is Chris Guldi with the Guldi Group at Keller Williams Realty right here in Southern Maryland. And so today's question I have that I'm going to answer for you on video is, how do I get my earnest money back in the state of Maryland? So this is coming up a lot right now with the increased offers we're having on properties and how hard it is for people to get properties. Even after people come together on all the terms, we're seeing some other issues trip up transactions, and fallout is at a high right now. And what happens with the earnest money deposit is, sometimes up for dispute. And I'll tell you that realistically, it's pretty clear who's entitled to the earnest money deposit, but not always did everybody agree to it. So how do you get your earnest money back? There's three ways to do it. The first one is kind of old, very rarely used. I'm going to hit on it real quick, tell you why it's never used, what the thought process was behind it, why it went away. So it used to be very common that the real estate broker would hold the earnest money deposit. That's a lot of liability. So brokers started transitioning over to the title companies. It's got to go to the title company anyways. We'll just give it to the title company at the time we write the contract. This has been working out very well, but it completely eliminates that one of the ways you as a consumer can get your earnest money back, or as the injured party in a transaction, get your earnest money back. The first way is a letter from the broker. The letter basically goes to both parties, and the broker says, I believe that the earnest money should go to this person. And we're going to give it to that person in 30 days if neither party objects. A lot of issues with this one. First off, the other party is going to always object and eliminate this if there's a true dispute going on. Sometimes with the institutional clients, if sellers may be holding the earnest money, they just won't respond because it's just buried and the property's long gone. So that's one way that you could get the earnest money back. One of the reasons that it's very rarely ever used is that back when I was a broker and this law came out, our error and omissions provider had our attorney call us and tell us not to ever use it. Why? Well, in Maryland, as agents or as a broker, we represent one party in the transaction. We have a fiduciary responsibility to that party. If I'm to say to the other party, hey, I think my party is entitled to the earnest money, they're going to say, hey, I think that's a conflict of interest, and they may be right. If I were to say to my client that I owe a fiduciary, I think the other guy deserves your money. Say it's the buyer's earnest money deposit. I'm going to give it to them. Clearly, they're going to be upset. And if I'm really representing their fiduciary, would I ever give their money up? Would I ever make that decision? The answer is no. And so I don't know that anybody ever actually used this method to get their earnest money back. It's still a law in the state of Maryland, but it's not going to happen. The second way to get your earnest money back is an interpleader with the court. So you can file for the court to hear the case, look at the terms of the contract, determine who's entitled to the earnest money, and they'll give you the earnest money back. So it's basically going and getting a court order is what the second way is for you to get your earnest money back. When I was a broker and we held earnest money deposits, this is the only thing I ever went to court for. And the only reason I ever called to court on these cases was because I held the earnest money. And so I would sit there and the judge would usually ask my attorney what the judge's options would be. And the attorney would explain that with the court order, the broker could disperse the earnest money to whichever party that the judge would decide. In every single one of these situations, one party didn't show up. And the judge made a decision that the other party got their earnest money and gave me a court order, and we went back and issued the earnest money and stuck the court order in the file every time. All right, the third way, the easiest way, is an agreement signed by both parties to the transaction, right? It's a release of the earnest money. You're releasing the contract, which isn't normally necessary, and it's another long story, maybe another video, but you're releasing the earnest money to one party or the other. And it's both parties agreeing to where the earnest money is being released. And honestly, this is the way it gets back most of the time, right? When a contract dies, this is typically part of the process. Let's say the buyer's financing falls apart at the last minute, but before their financing contingency hasn't expired, everybody knows the buyer gets their earnest money back and they sign it. And this is the way it goes on most common. Where the other two issues come up is when there's a dispute. And the seller says, no, I'm entitled to the earnest money. Or the buyer says, I know I'm walking away from the contract for no reason at all, but I want the earnest money back. So that's where these disputes come up. When there's a dispute, really the easiest way to resolve it is for the parties to split it. If there really is a gray area here that says that, maybe the buyer has a right to it, maybe the seller has a right to it, and sometimes there is a dispute over interpretation of the contracts, because at this point, most of us involved with the real estate transaction aren't attorneys, so we can't really interpret the contract. That's attorneys and judges that do that. So if there's some little gray area or a gap or something missing, then sometimes the parties just agree to split the earnest money and move on. So there's a lot of different ways to get your earnest money back, a lot of different possible outcomes, but these are all the only ways that you can get your earnest money back in the state of Maryland. So again, this is Chris Guldi with the Guldi Group at Keller Williams Realty. If you have a question, send it in. If we answer it on the video, then we'll send you a $25 gift card, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks for watching my video.